In the midst of chaos during the Egyptian Revolution were two men armed with cameras and tripods. Filmmakers Karim Hakim and Omar Shargawi directed and produced Half Revolution. This documentary tells the intimate story of a group of friends living in Cairo during the revolution. In Half Revolution, the directors capture the violence of the protest and the emotions of Egyptian civilians during this time of turmoil. Karim has directed several award-winning documentaries about issues in the Middle East and Egypt. He joins me here on this edition of Special Broadcast to discuss Half Revolution. You've produced several films about the Middle East and Egypt and issues going on in that part of the world. What got you started in that filmmaking area and especially in that part of the world?
Well, in Egypt, it's a very political climate. A lot of times the stories have some kind of political bent to them, and it's kind of what my interest is. You know, I don't do commercials. I do fiction films as well, and I do documentary. A lot of the times I'll do social issue related material, whether it's politics or you know, children's rights or development issues, and I like that because it's really, you know, the product of the film turns out to actually help people, raises money, raises awareness, and so those are important issues for me because it's not just about making a film, it's about trying to make a change as well. So that's why I like to do these types of projects.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And how did you get started in the filmmaking industry itself?
It's a good question. I mean, I kind of fell into it. I started, I've been doing this for 20 years, and I started in Boston. Started doing music videos, basically. I was a photographer. I started following my friends' bands. I was doing music related, you know, nightclub photography and portraits, and sort of got into album covers, and then the bands that I was working with asked me to do their music videos, and I had no idea how to make a music video. But I learned by doing it. I didn't go to film school. So this really became a nice vehicle to be very experimental and also learn along the way. But after a while, I got a bit turned off on music videos because the music that was being offered to me, it didn't really resonate with me after a while. So I kind of started to switch and do a bit more documentary and also short films, and also to shoot as a director of photography for other people. So, you know, if I'm directing something, sometimes I'll shoot it. Sometimes I'll hire other cameramen. Sometimes I'll work only as a DP on other projects. Sometimes I'll just produce. So it really depends on the project, depends on what's needed, you know, but everything's interrelated, you know, and one thing leads to another, and there you go.
And you mentioned that you like doing the documentaries because they actually help the people who are in the video. Are there other reasons that you find that this is personally important to you?
Well, I mean, it's being a filmmaker in the Middle East is a very, I would say, privileged place to be, because there are so many social issues that, you know, you can tackle them through documentary, you can do them through fiction, short films, and it's really about creating a conversation. It's about inspiring new generation of filmmakers. It's about having, you know, maybe taboo subjects brought to light, and I think it's, you know, that's part of our responsibility as filmmakers is to you know, engage those topics, because media is a very powerful tool, as you know, and certainly in a country where you have a lot of illiteracy and you have a lot of ignorance when it comes to positions on social issues. Cinema can become a very accessible way for the common person to to be, become aware of something that they otherwise wouldn't have been if they hadn't seen that film, or if that film didn't exist. So this is why I like to do what I do. I don't like to get involved in silly projects that have no point, I like to kind of feel that I'm making a difference in what I'm doing. So that's why it's interesting.
I want to talk about your most recent film, which is Half Revolution, about the Arab Spring and the Egyptian Revolution.
Mm-hmm.
Why did you pick that title, Half Revolution, for the film?
Well, Half Revolution is really, it's a very provocative title. It's something that I think people easily remember, and it's a challenge. I think the public perception was that the revolution was finished with the end of Mubarak, and we wanted to make the point to Western audiences that, in fact, no, sorry, it's not over yet. There's still a lot of work to do. We're in the middle of a revolution. A revolution is not just about deposing a dictator, but it's about dismantling a dictatorship, and it's about reforming institutions and really creating the rule of law inside a society that is policing a plurality of opinions. And in a dictatorship, especially like in Egypt, the regime and the system of the regime is so lopsided and so monopolized towards the ruling party that there is no plurality, and anybody that speaks, let's say, contradictory to that regime is usually the subject of any form of oppression, whether it's being arrested or intimidated or discredited. So we wanted to get the point out that this revolution is still very much alive, and we succeeded in that. We started to change people's perceptions of that, and we found even journalists using the term half revolution to describe what was happening in Egypt and also across the Middle East. I mean, this film it takes place in Egypt, but it could easily be any country in any moment of the Arab Spring, because there's so many parallels. Of course, in Egypt, things played out much less violently than we see in Libya and Syria, and even to an extent in Yemen. And we're lucky that way, but it doesn't mean that it's not over. I mean, there's a lot of movement inside the country to purge old regime elements, to stamp out corruption, to expose people for being sort of agents of monopolistic ideologies, whether they're old regime or new regime. And I think we also succeeded also in because it has kind of multi-layers. I'm half Egyptian, half American, and my co-director's half Palestinian and half Danish. So we're half-half, we're halflings. So we're also, it's the half revolution, So it has many meanings, but mainly it's really to make that political point that it's not over. Yeah.
And in the documentary, the point of view is from a group of friends who are in the revolution, rather than, say, the government or the military. Why did you pick that point of view, and what effect do you think it has on viewers and on the documentary as a whole?
Well, we didn't have a large luxury of choice because things were happening so fast. And my family and my group of friends tend to be pretty interesting people. They're very emotional, they're characters. And we really didn't have much of a choice, because during the day we would shoot down in the street, and at night we'd be stuck at home largely. And there were many emotional conversations and things happening around the house that had a relevancy to what was happening in the street. So that was just a natural progression. I mean, there was no plan, there was no script. We were just shooting what was happening in front of us in a very, verite, raw kind of way. And after a few days of filming, we kind of had the idea that we could weave these two stories together and create a personal frame of reference that allows the audience to access the much bigger kind of issue of the revolution through this personal and intimate story. And that's really resonated well with people, because they feel like they were there when they see the film. They feel like they're part of our group. We're just really focusing on the emotional threads of the characters as some sort of access to the much bigger ocean that is the revolution. And of course, there's many, many stories happening in the revolution. Some of them are related, some of them are not. And I think that as time progresses, we're going to have a very big body of films that all are telling a small piece of the revolution, because there's no real definitive film on how to kind of describe what happened, you know. So I think we're going to need a library of those experiences to really study and cross-reference and build a much more detailed picture of what the revolution meant to different groups and different people.
And in an interview, you said that it was your duty to show people what was going on. Why do you say that?
Because, you know, being a filmmaker, like I said, is a very privileged position, and especially in a country like Egypt, where you have such high degrees of poverty and sort of ill education, undereducated people, non-educated people, that, you know, it became a duty in a sense that I have to work and do my part in this kind of upheaval, this big social movement. And even when we were in the street, people were saying, yeah, film, show the world what's happening, and you know, we rely on you because no one else is going to tell our story, and this is very true. If we didn't do it, I don't think it would have been done. You know, it certainly would have been done in a different way. Everyone has their point of view with this experience, but just like the other kind of work I'm doing, whether it's development or child issues or things that have a social component, this is why I do what I do. So it became very interesting and very easy for me to do it. And of course, seeing all of the violence and all of the hurt people, the maimed people, the people who are blinded by shotgun shells, just the misery, a lot of misery, and a lot of just the selfless sacrifice that people were all engaged in, and putting themselves in trouble and in harm's way. It was a constant reminder to me that what I'm doing is absolutely necessary and is nothing compared to, in many cases, what people went through. Losing brothers, losing parents, losing their eyes, being arrested, disappearing. Any imaginable awful thing you can imagine was happening at the same time. So this was always in the background, and always a pressure on me to keep going, you know. Yeah.
And what's one thing that you hope that people who see this film, the viewers, get out of the documentary?
I think people certainly are going to be aware of the power of the people, you know, that this collective movement, this collective consciousness that's happening, and a phenomenon that happened where, let's say, you know, some of the poorest people in the world, some of the most uneducated people in the world were able to dismantle what perhaps is one of the biggest police states in the history of the world in a relatively short period of time. I mean, this was something that was so awe-inspiring and so beautiful to see that solidarity. I mean, when you're out in the street in those days, you know, that the police are shooting tear gas, and people are using onion to clean their eyes and vinegar to breathe through the vinegar to get out of the smoke. People are throwing down onions from their balconies, and just everyone's mobilizing to help everyone else. Guys on motorcycles are grabbing guys that have been hurt and getting them to help. And all of this kind of collective mind and effort, just spontaneously, was so inspiring that, you know, it really gave me a lot of hope for humanity and the ability to say, no, we're not going to take it anymore, you know. And this is something that I think audiences are really blown away by, because they can feel it, they can see it, they can touch it. It's something that's there, you know. It's not something like that's going to disappear. And that film becomes a permanent record of that. And even now, showing the film to people 2 years later, you know, they just start crying and they start to just remember everything that happened to them. And that's very important to continue the progress that the revolution is going through, is to remind them what they went through and the sacrifice that they had to make to get to this point. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us here today. It was nice to meet you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. We look forward to your film.
Yeah, and if I could add, on October 25th, we're going to be showing in Washington, D.C. at the East Street Cinema. And you can go to tug.com to make your reservations for that. And I encourage everyone to come and see it.